In a secluded valley where the clouds moved like quiet monks and the rivers hummed lullabies of forgotten wisdom, there lived a gardener named Lao Min. No one knew where he had come from. Some said he had once been a scholar in the northern provinces, others believed he had been a soldier who laid down his sword after seeing the red petals of war fall like blood from plum trees. But Lao Min never spoke of the past. He lived alone, beside a crumbling cottage overgrown with moss, and rose with the mist to tend a wild garden where silence bloomed more abundantly than the vegetables. He had reached an age when the body no longer served without question. One morning, as he bent to pick a plum fallen too early from the branch, his knees trembled, not from effort, but from an invisible hollowness. His breath shortened, not from exertion, but from a disconnection so subtle it had gone unnoticed for years. It wasn't pain. It was absence. As though a part of him had quietly left the room long ago, and he was only now noticing the vacancy. He sat by the river's edge, hand over heart, and whispered aloud, not to anyone, but to the wind that had always listened. I have forgotten something. I don't know what, but I feel it. As if my soul is underfed and my breath is borrowed. The water did not respond, but it shimmered. A low current rippled outward, and in that ripple Lao Min saw his own reflection. Not as he was now, but as he had been long ago, eyes bright with questions, heart unburdened by the weight of time. He returned to his home in silence. That night, he did not light a lamp. He sat in the darkness, allowing it to wrap around him like a forgotten robe. From the corner of the room, an old scroll, left behind by a traveling monk years before, glowed faintly in the moonlight. It was no longer parchment, it was invitation. He unrolled it slowly. The ink was faded, the characters weathered, but the message was clear. To remember the way, begin with the breath. To restore the body, tend to the mind. To heal the soul, walk where your feet touch only what is real. He slept with those words beneath his pillow and woke before the sun. Each morning that followed, he sat beneath the old almond tree in the garden and breathed, not to fill his lungs, but to listen. He closed his eyes and waited for his breath to find him. Inhale. A whisper from the mountains. Exhale. A sigh from the earth. Slowly, with the patience of a stone becoming moss, he allowed his breath to deepen. And with it, so did his presence. The thoughts quieted. The ache receded. There, between one breath and the next, he began to remember, not facts or names, but the original stillness that had once lived inside him. Days turned to weeks, and Lao Min became less a man and more a rhythm. He walked the garden without rush, his footsteps sinking gently into the soil as though his body remembered it had once been part of the earth. He spoke less, but when he did, his words felt like roots brushing against something eternal. One evening, as twilight folded itself into the folds of the valley, a young woman from the nearby village passed through his garden path. She was crying softly, her hands clenched around a letter. Lao Min looked up from his herbs and did not ask her name. You've lost something, he said, not unkindly. She nodded, surprised. My husband left. Said I am too quiet. That I listen too much and speak too little. She sat beside him, and for a long while they simply breathed. No advice. No solution. Just air shared in silence. Before she left, she asked, What do you do here all day? He replied, I remember how to live. That night, Lao Min wrote on a leaf and pinned it to his garden gate. Tend only what your hands can touch. Let go of the rest. He had spent decades worrying about distant things, the weather in far-off lands, the opinions of people who had long since vanished, the inevitable withering of his own body. But now, each morning, he asked only one question. What is mine to care for today? The soil. The herbs. The breath. The tea. The neighbors who passed by with stories in their eyes. By winter, his body had grown no stronger, but his spirit no longer lived in exile. He ate slowly, like one in prayer. Each meal began with gratitude, not to a deity, but to the sun that warmed the tomatoes, to the rain that nourished the rice, to the unseen worms that turned death into nourishment beneath his feet. He ate until satisfied, not until full. He drank water as though it were medicine, and each sip tasted like clarity. He no longer counted calories or rules. He listened. If a food made his body feel lighter, clearer, more open, he kept it. If it dulled his senses or left him restless, he let it go. In this way, he began to see food not as consumption, but as conversation. His sleep, once riddled with restlessness, returned to the rhythm of the valley. He went to bed with the owls and woke with the crows. He covered his windows with linen so the moonlight could reach him. His dreams became letters from the unseen, some filled with symbols he could not decipher, others vivid memories of his mother's lullabies and the day he first touched snow. One night, during the last frost of winter, he dreamed he was a tree. His arms were branches, and his breath was wind. When he awoke, there were tears on his face, not from sorrow, but from remembrance. He had not just returned to himself. He had returned to the world. In spring, he began visiting the village again. At first, people were surprised. The silent gardener, stepping out from his solitude. But he did not speak of his transformation. He simply listened. He brewed tea for the elder who had lost her sight. He taught the children how to plant basil. He helped repair a broken roof with a man whose hands were worn from grief. And then, one day, a child approached him in the market. A boy, no older than 8, who stared at Lao Min as if he were a riddle wrapped in skin. "Why are you always smiling?" the boy asked, blinking. Lao Min knelt to his level and whispered as though revealing a secret. "Because I stopped chasing the sky and started growing like the roots." The boy nodded solemnly, though he did not understand. But that night, he sat in silence beside his mother, and watched the moon rise without asking a single question. Years passed. Seasons spun their endless cycle. Lao Min's hair turned silver, then white. His steps slowed, but never hesitated. His breath remained steady, even as time took more than it gave. And then, on a morning when the plum trees bloomed in defiance of their age, Lao Min did not rise. He was found in the garden, sitting upright beneath the almond tree, hands folded, eyes closed, breath silent, but not gone. A faint smile traced his face, like a leaf just before it lets go. They buried him at the edge of the garden, where the herbs would continue to grow. No stone. Only a wooden sign carved with the words, "Grow slow. Remember the sky." In the years that followed, villagers told stories of the silent gardener who breathed like a mountain and listened like the river. They said if you sat long enough in his garden, you could feel your own breath soften. Some said the wind there spoke differently. Others that the trees bowed when you walked past. But one thing they all agreed, something sacred had happened there. And every spring, when the plum blossoms fell, the children gathered beneath the almond tree, breathing in rhythm, their eyes closed, their roots remembering what the sky had once whispered through the lungs of a man who had learned how to live.